We are ANN, and this is Planet Talk.
Hello and welcome to Planet Talk. My name is Alex Stein, and today is May 27th, 2021. Today I want to talk about the Israel-Palestine conflict, and we'll look at the natal chart for the state of Israel. So just to lay the groundwork, the origins, I want to talk a bit about the origins of this conflict. So Israel was born in 1948 during a Saturn-Pluto conjunction. This is the same one that began the Cold War. This was right after World War II and after the Holocaust. And at that time, of course, there were millions of dispossessed Jews, whose lives had been ruined in the Holocaust, who had lost most of their family, if not all their family. There was this great sense that well, first of all, enormous trauma, right? Enormous trauma and a feeling of we need to be safe. We need a homeland because, it's not just like the Holocaust came out of nowhere. Jews for most of Western history were not only a marginalized group, but, hated, violently oppressed, the long list of terrible things. Now, Jerusalem historically was, the kind of home base of the Jewish homeland. It was the site of the temple, which twice was taken away from the Jews. Twice the Jews were expelled from their homeland, first by the Babylonians and by the Romans. And so, for 2,000 years, as a people, the Jews, of whom I am one, have been carrying, this grievance, essentially. And then, just one of the worst genocidal traumas, the worst genocidal trauma ever to be visited upon anybody occurred during the Holocaust. 6 million people, ethnically cleansed. Now, so this feeling of we need a homeland, we need to be safe, was the driving force there. And there was a Zionist slogan at the time referring to Palestine, later known as the state of Israel, as a land without a people, for people without a land. So a land without a people for people without a land. Now, there was one problem, of course. There were already people there. Okay, there were people living there, and who'd been living there for hundreds, established for thousands of years, and who, of course, felt that they have just as much of a right as anybody else does to this land, if not more, because they're here. They were there then. And now, if you want to really get a good history on this, there's an amazing book called The Lemon Tree by Sandy Tolan, documenting the lives of one Palestinian man and a Jewish woman. The man grew up in a house with this lemon tree in the backyard in 48 or 46 or thereabout, during the War of Independence, so-called War of Independence. His family was expelled from their house, and then this woman's family later moved into the house, and the book follows their two stories. Her family's life escaping the Holocaust, his life in what came to be a repressive state. So it's a nation born of trauma, trauma on both sides, and what has happened now is the situation in Gaza. Gabor Mate, himself a Holocaust survivor, he's a trauma specialist. He speaks really well on this. He himself used to be a Zionist until he really saw what was going on there. And said that he just cried for weeks straight when he saw what was going on in Gaza, and that essentially there's no such thing as PTSD there because there's no post. The trauma just continues to happen constantly. And in such a situation, it is natural that extremism should breed. So that's just some of the background. Now I want to, I'll share the screen. We can take a look at the chart a little bit. So first of all, I already mentioned the Saturn-Pluto conjunction, right? We're living through Saturn-Pluto conjunction right now. And historically, most of the big conflicts, big blow-ups, flare-ups in the Israel-Palestine conflict, stretching all the way back to the birth of the state of Israel in 48, have followed Saturn-Pluto alignments. Now, Saturn, control, restriction, authority, Pluto, intensity, compulsion, aggression, wounding, trauma, depth, ultimately transformation, but having to go through a lot of stages, and a lot of, when we talk about transformation, that's like a beautiful, like very spiritual sounding word, but what are we transforming? We're transforming our horrible, bestial nature, essentially, and that's a lot of what we have to confront with Pluto. When we put Saturn and Pluto together, it's death meets the Grim Reaper, and it's hard. So now it's also Saturn, Pluto, and then the moon is there in a wide conjunction, and the moon refers to the home, right? To the home, to our inner nature, our basic needs, and our basic needs and sense of well-being, or lack of well-being. That's all lunar territory. And with Saturn, Pluto, Moon, Saturn, Pluto, Moon is not an easy combination. For a nation, this is about intense, deep struggle, intense, rigid division, hatred, splitting, the idea of good versus evil being projected across both sides in this very intense way, and then this way of digging into the position and refusing to budge in an almost automatic way. And for a human individual born with Saturn, Pluto, Moon conjunction, I would say, if I were counseling them, what you are here to do, healing wise, is learn to really feel. To allow all of the volcanic, emotional, scary stuff that is within you, that got into you one way or another, that either belongs to you or that belongs to other people and somehow got in, to allow that to move through, rather than going into lockdown mode, which Saturn, of course, represents. Of course, we're living through Saturn-Pluto conjunction, and what have we been doing? We've been in lockdowns for the last couple of years that we're just coming out of now, or the last year. So lockdown mode, right? That emotional lockdown is something that can happen with Saturn, Moon, and then with Pluto, it's like in response to like great fear, great kind of dread of what lurks there. Essentially Pluto's the abyss, and so we emotions face us with the abyss, and we go into lockdown mode. Now on a national scale, right, there's just this sense Israel is an unsafe place. Nobody who lives there fully ever feels safe, right? And now the disparity in the disparity in the horrors that are actually visited upon people in Israel, when it comes to uh, Israelis versus Palestinians, the disparity is huge. I don't have the exact numbers, but in this conflict, and this is like all others, in this conflict, is something like over 200 Palestinians have died and 10 Israelis have died, and that's the way it always goes. And the um, the argument that supporters of the Israeli position make is, um, Hamas are a bunch of cowards and they use human shields. They go into these buildings and they hide behind women and children, and they make sure that those buildings get blown up, and all these people die, and it makes Israel look bad. And it's like, okay, like, even if that's true, is it still okay to kill all those people? Like, the Israeli position is, we absolutely need to do this to defend ourselves. If we didn't, these terrorists, these evil people, would be out to destroy us. And yes, the day that Israel got nationhood, um, resistance basically declared, we will never, all the Arab nations said, we're not going to recognize the state of Israel. And so this is that's the beginning of the whole thing, and really nothing has budged since then. So this sense of living under permanent threat, whether Israeli or Palestinian, right? The situation in Gaza is horrible. After the elections that they had in, I think it was 2006, but I could be wrong on that. But the elections that they held in the Palestinian territories, where Hamas ended up winning the free and fair elections. Hamas is an extremist group, but they were elected free and fairly to positions of authority in over the Palestinian territories. Israel and America, went into freak out mode after that, and Israel put this blockade on Gaza, to basically, keep out food, water, medical supplies, all this kind of stuff. Now in Gaza, there's something like 50% unemployment. It's a nightmare place to live. It's been described as the world's largest outdoor prison. And so yeah, okay, that prison sense, that intense splitting, we see all of that with the Saturn-Pluto moon. Now, other aspects of this chart. One thing about Israel, it's say what you will about the humanitarian situation there. There is, it's a very cultured place, a very, besides the humanitarian nightmare, right? A very cultured place, very advanced place, higher learning, scientific advancement, research institutions, all this kind of stuff. And we really see this in the Jupiter-Uranus opposition. And this is another thing people will say in defense of Israel. The Jews came there and turned this wasteland, this desert, this nothing, this backward place into, like, a place of real culture and advancement. And okay, I'm not sure that excuses anything, but it is true. It is true that there is a lot of advanced thinking that goes on there. There are a lot of great Israeli scholars and scientists, and artists and historians, and several great Israeli historians who write very well about the conflict, who are actually having to live in exile now because they're seen as anti-Semitic. But there's still I think too with Jupiter Uranus that the love of freedom and freedom as an ideal is 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 very strong, and that's something that's strong with the Jewish people. And the irony, of course, about the whole posture of I guess we could call it the ego of the Israeli nation, is that it's very antithetical to a lot of what we might call the ego identity of of the Jewish people, which has tended to be uh, very humanitarian, lovers of culture and learning and caring for other people in the world. So um, let's go back to the chart. Uh, Now another thing we can see is the Sun Mars square. So that's hot-headedness, the willingness to fight, right? The fact that, right, this is a nation where everybody, men, women, are there's compulsory military service, and so everybody knows how to shoot a gun, right? Everybody has probably flown around sitting at the edge of a helicopter, like holding a machine gun, wearing big old boots, um, and not only that, but they actually fight in conflicts, and they actually, it's not like the Swiss army who it's like these people actually fight and are actually made to do things that might a lot of people, you can see interviews with former IDF soldiers who are really traumatized by the things that they've had to do. um, anyway, there's that. Then there's also this Mars Jupiter trine, and Mars Jupiter, it's like excessive use of force. That's a hallmark, I think, of how Israel deals with their conflicts. Is you know you poke me and I'll club you, right? There's also this kind of cowboy sort of mentality, the also the pioneer, the settler. We're going to expand, we're going to go out, we're going to, oh, that there's people living here, forget about it, like, I'm moving in. There's a lot of, with both Sun Mars and Jupiter Mars, there's a lot of kind of pushy, defiant, me first, ego sort of stuff. um anyway, that's about where I want to leave it for right now. So, you know, I I recognize that this is one of the most ugly, intransigent conflicts there in the world, right? It's lasted now for 70 plus years. Um, it's just it's and it doesn't look like it's going to go away anytime soon. And yet, all I feel like I can do, and I feel like most uh, reasonable people can do, is urge people to come together in some way on this. And it sounds really stupid, and it sounds really cliche and really useless, but I don't see what other choice there is. You know, the well, I do want to talk a little bit about what's going on right now and why it boiled up in this way. This conflict has been a little bit different than others, in that there's been a lot of clash, in the streets, actually, within Israel, with Israeli Palestinians, not living in Gaza or the West Bank. Um, this happened in Jerusalem, when Palestinians were outraged over the Israeli storming of the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the famous mosque with the Dome of the Rock, considered one of Islam's holiest sites. Um, there had also been, weeks of tension where far right extremist Jewish groups were, chanting, marching and chanting "Death to Arabs," while Arab groups were attacking Jewish people. Um, and this all tallies with the Uranus Saturn square that we're experiencing. Of course, also Uranus Pluto, the intensity of the division and the hatreds and everything. But the Uranus Saturn, with that sense of instability and things reaching a breaking point, which we're seeing all over the world. We're seeing here in America, Colombia, um, Myanmar, Hong Kong, like it goes on and on and on. The world uh, is feeling this kind of jagged breaking point sort of tension right now. Um, so yeah, I don't know how this is all going to play out. The conflict is ramping up again. Maybe Mars Neptune might have something to do with that. I think Mars was square um, Israel's natal Neptune on the day that this all blew up. I think on May 10th, and now we're at a Mars Neptune trine. And I've talked about the Mars Neptune aspects in America relating to the gun violence. Now, this also can relate to the Israeli-Palestinian violence. The kind of the images of violence that can percolate into the collective. It's the Neptune images and the collective consciousness and unconscious, and Mars violence. Anyway, that's some of the things that I see bringing this up right now. As far as the larger picture goes, we can only hope that that some humanity will come through eventually in this. So that's all I'm going to say for that today. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this and found it illuminating, and I will see you next time. Thanks.